welcome back to another Citizens Gambit. If it's your first time joining us, let me introduce myself. My name is Ojus. Normally we'd be joined by another person, Suhaib Qasim. He cannot be here today. He's having some internet issues, and so he has left me alone to talk to you guys about the upcoming election in November. To check out more of our episodes, you can go to our YouTube channels at Citizens Gambit Podcast, where you can see all of our previous interviews and discussions ranging from things like psychedelics to the defund the police movement to comedy and politics and everything in between. We also have a blog, www.citizensgambit.org, where you can read all of our corresponding essays that go with our specific episodes. So now, let's get into it. So we had a longer episode set out for you guys today. It was going to deal with some basic economic principles, but because I don't have anyone else to talk to and it's just me doing it alone, I didn't think I could rant and lecture you guys for an entire hour. So instead, I'm only going to lecture you guys for around 15 to 20 minutes as I do a small PSA / guide to the voting process that's coming up in November. Specifically, I want to talk about voter shaming, okay? So in case you didn't realize, we have an election coming up in November. This is a really important election. More than half of American adults consider the 2020 election one of the most important elections of our lifetime. I mean, think about what we're voting for. We're voting for a pandemic. We're voting for chronic unemployment and unprecedented job loss. We're voting for healthcare. We're voting for the environment, foreign policy. We're voting to create a compassionate society. And how we vote now and how we vote in the future will dictate the compassionate society we create. So this is existential. Now, I am a firm believer in the liberal democracy process, and I believe that everyone who is eligible to vote should vote. It is a right and a responsibility in your democracy, in any democracy, where you should exercise your political beliefs. If there's something on the ballot that you believe in, you should vote for it. Now, that being said, I don't want to shame people into voting. Many people have decisions about why or why not they choose to vote, and they also will have different decisions and thought processes about who and what they vote for. And as existential as you believe this election is, as I believe this election is, voter shaming and telling people or forcing people to vote for an option that they deem is not in line with their political beliefs is not the way to run a democracy. So I'm targeting this rant specifically at the Democratic Party because that is what I see most happening on my social media in terms of forcing people who are typically progressives to vote for Biden, even though Biden is not the choice of most of the progressive party. So I'm going to kick the hornet's nest a little bit here. But before I do that, let's just cover what is voter shaming. And so I see it a lot. As I said, I see it a lot on my Instagram, a lot on my Twitter, a lot on my Facebook. It's basically when people say things like, if you vote for Howie Hawkins, you're giving the vote to Trump. If you write in Sanders, you're giving the vote for Trump. If you decide not to vote, you're giving the vote for Trump. You are a bad Democrat if you decide to vote for something else other than Biden. You don't believe in the future of our country, or you're a fascist, or you are a Trump sympathizer, or things like that. Basically creating statements that are untrue of the person based on their voting. And it's problematic for a couple of reasons that we're going to get into. One of the reasons is that, let's be honest, people who make up the Howie Hawkins vote or even the Biden vote for that matter, or the Sanders write-in vote, they don't comprise a majority of Americans, and you want to get the majority of Americans. And honestly, if you're trying to decide between Trump and Biden and the margin is that narrow, they are both bad candidates, and you should vote for someone else, honestly. Now, I'm going to talk you through my voting thought process. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I'm just going to give you my opinion and why I am having trouble getting behind Biden as a progressive. I have my Bernie t-shirt on today, and it kind of hurts that Bernie is supporting Biden, but I believe in the progressive movement, and I believe the progressive movement is also diverse, and they're also morally minded. And so I know that whatever it is, at the end of the day, progressives are going to do their bit to further our democracy. And regardless of who's in office, whether it's going to be Trump or Biden, we are not going to stop fighting. So I want to get that out of the way first. So now let's get into a little bit about why I'm hesitant to vote for Biden. So the first one is Biden's platform. If you recall, he did I think a speech for Wall Street, basically, where he said that under his presidency, nothing will fundamentally change. And that is what he's basically run his whole campaign on, right? It's a return to normalcy, a regression to the Obama era. And to Obama's credit, he did a lot of things right, but he didn't do things like he didn't fix the criminal justice system. He didn't fix immigration. I mean, the cages were built under his administration. He didn't fix healthcare. What he did do was say the right words. He placated the populace. And that is, it's not wrong, but it's troubling. And I'll tell you why it's troubling. In 1968, during the Democratic National Convention, when which took place here in Chicago, when Mayor Daley was in office, Martin Luther King came down to talk about the Fair Housing Act and to get Chicago on board with the Fair Housing Act. Now in Chicago, which is one of the more segregated cities in America, segregation was not explicitly written into the law, but it was practiced by a wide majority of Americans. And what Martin Luther found was that convincing Americans, when this was an issue of that wasn't in the law, that wasn't open, it was so much harder to convince people of that point of view. And he's not wrong, he's completely right. Because what he did when he gave a press conference along with Mayor Daley, he criticized Chicago segregation. He said that Mayor Daley should have been trying to do a better job. And Mayor Daley placated Martin Luther King by saying, you know what, you're right, we should do a better job. And that completely took Martin Luther King by surprise. And what it says is that words are powerful, but they can also lie to us. Politicians rely heavily on rhetoric and very little on substance. And when they do that, it makes pointing out their malicious intentions that much harder. We see this when Biden defends his stance on climate change, things like forming task forces with the Sunrise Movement. That was a really big step towards the progressive agenda, and it was something that I was really, really happy about that he was doing. But how can I expect Biden to go through with climate issues when his whole platform has been funded by fossil fuel executives? And you see, he's going back on his word even as early as today, around 3 months before the elections, when he removes from his platform the end to fossil fuel subsidies. So he has a plan to continue giving fossil fuel executives money to continue fracking in America. And that is wrong, and it's horrible for climate change. So when you vote for Biden, you vote for a return to normalcy. And if your normalcy is getting Sunday brunches while young Black men are out there getting shot by the police, in my opinion, settling for Biden is one of the most privileged things you can do. You cannot settle and simply wait for things to happen, because after Biden comes, there's going to be another probably 2-term Kamala Harris. And when that comes, that's 12 years of neoliberal politics. In 12 years, what can happen? An economic crisis, another pandemic, climate change is going to get worse. Everything at this point is going to be prohibitively expensive. A good example of this is Medicare for All, right? Medicare for All was first proposed in 1946. We are still fighting for Medicare for All to become the law of the land in this country. And Biden, as recently as like a couple days ago, has come out and said that he would not support Medicare for All. He would in fact veto the bill in the event that it even passed through both the House of Representatives and the Congress. When you tell me to suck it up and vote for Biden, it defies every principle I stand for. And to be honest, it's not the way to get people to be actively involved in politics. There's a really great anecdote from Crystal Ball on Rising where she says that there's a particular politician, there's a particular interview where there's this man who typically he's not voted in like the last 30 or 40 years, something like that. And when asked why, he says, well, for me, basically, I'm of course paraphrasing, he says, basically for me, the problems remain the same. My roads don't get paved. The rich people keep getting richer and richer. Everything for me keeps going up in terms of expenses. And that has happened under a Republican and a Democrat. And so that's why I don't believe in voting, because it, regardless of who I vote for, it only makes my life that much harder. And so this is what happens when you shame voters, right? You create voter apathy. People stop thinking that politics is something that they can have a stake in, and they start believing that politics is something that they are too poor to participate in, or cannot participate in, and it's something that they are discouraged from participating in, because that is a precedent that you have set by forcing voters to vote for someone they don't want to. What else are you doing when you do that? You undermine our democracy. You condition people to buy into propaganda rather than vote for what they believe in. In a democracy, as a citizen, it is your job, and it is my job as well, as a citizen, as a registered eligible voter, to vote for the issues that I want, and then to hold politicians to those issues. If I want Medicare for all, I am going to vote for the candidate who is going to propose Medicare for all. And so trying to force them to fall in line to a specific ideology or specific leaning that doesn't represent the views that they want or doesn't go to what they want, basically goes against the basic tenets of democracy. And you see that, right? In 2016, when it was Hillary versus Trump, only around 60% of the US populace voted. And that 60% was divided basically between Hillary, Trump, a third party like Jill Stein, whoever the libertarian was, and no voting. That means the other 40% of eligible voters in America didn't vote. Now, when you tell me that I should vote for whether it's Hillary or Biden because the other side will vote for Trump, what you do is you create a boogeyman, right? You say everyone who is not us is dangerous, and we have to suppress them as best as we can. And that does not create healthy dialogue in the United States, and it does not view our fellow Americans as Americans. It views them as these monsters who can vote for something so heinous as Trump, which granted he is heinous. But if you looked at why people voted for Trump in 2016, he represented a break from the current follies and foibles of politics, right? He was talking, if you look at Bernie Sanders' rhetoric, and if you look at Trump's rhetoric, they're incredibly similar, especially Trump's 2016 rhetoric, where he talked about trade deals like NAFTA and the havoc they caused on industrial towns. And when he talked about how the rich kept getting richer and how the poor just kept getting poorer and how people felt alienated from this new brand of politics. They thought he was something better than Hillary. Now, I don't necessarily agree with this, but this is the picture that has not been painted for a lot of blue voters in America. When we think of Trump voters, we just think of, honestly, a few morons, and a few morons who have outdated views and need to be defeated. And that's not the way we're gonna get real progress in this country. It simply isn't. So people are not monsters, and I want to make that abundantly clear in this. And so fighting over a small number of votes within that 60% range, telling people not to vote third party or not to vote or to just vote for Biden because the other side will vote for Trump, doesn't present our fellow Americans as actual Americans, and it presents them as something less than. And what we saw is actually the opposite, right? A lot of people who voted for Trump in 2016 actually defected to Bernie Sanders' side, and are now that Bernie Sanders is out of the race, they're voting third party now. So even on the Republican side, their coalition isn't fully formed. And so going after progressive voters and those who do not follow the centrist Democratic agenda and telling them that they are bad Democrats or that they are bad citizens is not the way to go, because it doesn't achieve anything and it's not even true. So instead of fighting amongst the 60% of the populace that's supposedly divided, why don't you try and reach out to the 40% of Americans who don't vote? Find out why they don't vote. Maybe it's because voting is not a national holiday, and so they can't take time off for it. Maybe it's because they don't feel that their needs are getting addressed. So find a candidate that speaks to their needs, or be the candidate that speaks to their needs. Actually represent the populace that you want to attract. Don't force people to just get in line and vote for anyone who mildly might throw them a bone after giving all of the good meat to the executives and the rich people. Where do we go from here now that you know that this is an issue and that voter shaming doesn't work? Even it's a bad strategy because it just doesn't work and it creates more voter apathy and then it undermines your democracy. What can you do? Well, for once, please, for God, for once, do not get caught up in the bullshit of an electability argument, okay? You are not a political pundit. I am not a political pundit. We are voters. Our job is to vote and then to hold our representatives accountable to what they voted for, right? When you vote for Joe Biden, you better know what you're voting for. You're voting for his Hyde Amendment. You're voting for his 1994 crime bill. You're voting for his position on the Iraq War. You're voting for his failed task forces with Bernie Sanders. If you want Medicare for all, if you want a Green New Deal, if you want a federal jobs guarantee, or if you want UBI, you know Biden is not the way to go. Vote for someone who will give you that. Don't expect Biden to, once he gets into office, to uphold these values that you have, because he never said he shared them, never. And he will continue to pander to the base that he wants to represent, not the base that, if voter shaming works and, you can get all the progressive in line, not the base that actually voted for him. So, like I said, if you believe that Joe Biden can fix the environment despite his plan to continue subsidizing fossil fuel companies, vote Biden. If you believe in Medicare for all, vote Hawkins. If you believe in regressive, nationalistic tribalism that Trump is spewing the election cycle, then vote Trump. My point is, vote for what you believe in, not what others tell you to vote for. You know what's best for you and for your family, and it is your job in a democracy to exercise that vote. So, all right, rant aside, that's all I have for this episode. It's pretty short and there's not a whole lot to it, but I hope that this sparks some interest and some discussion and some dialogue nonetheless. Again, I'm not telling you who to vote for. This is up to you and you entirely. I am not going to tell you who I'm going to vote for, but maybe you can try and guess in the comments below. Please let us know, what policies do you believe in? What do you think the state of politics is today? And what do you think that tells you about our democracy? Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel. This is Ojus signing off. Bye-bye.